I listened to Declan Rice's interview alongside David Moyes, and Declan Rice was quite positive about wanting to play for the manager. And you can tell that players dial in things and say things because it's the thing to say, and they don't want to get on the wrong side of a conversation for the guy they're working for. But I got the impression that Declan Rice and the group of players want to play for David Moyes. So that's the first question out. Do the players want to play for him? Because normally what you do is you lose a manager when when a manager loses the dressing room or the players aren't responding to him.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that's the case. It's undeniable. It's undeniable David Moyes and his team have underachieved this season, and David is responsible for that. And whether West Ham survive this season, I think there'll probably likely be a review on his position going forward, because you've underachieved. And to be in the situation you're in now, irrespective of the let-off that you might get for being successful in a European competition, is not ideal. Again, the question abounds, who do you take? It's easy taking people out. Who do you replace them with? I looked at the game yesterday and I thought for 20 minutes of the first half, West Ham were in the game, really in the game. Bowen looked like he was alive again and they had opportunities. I'm not entirely sure, besides bad organisation on the first goal, what David is culpable for in terms of, and this is not me defending Moyes, because I think that he needs to do far more than he's done this season, and I can't allow him to keep living in the past and trotting out those tropes to get past the challenges of people saying your team's underachieving. But I'm not entirely sure what you can do about playing short and a centre-back or a defender giving the ball to the opposition. I'm not entirely sure what you can do when a goalkeeper decides to do what he's done there. And I'm not entirely sure what you can do when a goalkeeper's got chocolate wrists for the fifth goal. Those all to one side. And the West Ham players will take that away from that. They'll go, it was one of those moments. We got hit by 3 or 4 goals that we should never have let in on ourselves. It's not reflective of our team's performance. It's not reflective of where we are as a side. So they won't be. I don't think they'll be psychologically scarred by that. I think they'll put their boots on and go again. But David's performance in front of the media last night was just low-key.
Yeah.
But he's low-key fella. I mean, what do you want him to be? Something out of character. You never see him beaming like a Cheshire cat, and you never see him crying into his beer like other managers do.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right, Simon. You cannot legislate. Going in at half-time 2-1 and you're still in the match, very much still in the match.
And bang.
Yeah, and bang, in the 46th minute, a calamity at the back. Wilson takes full opportunity, as a striker should. And Bosch, you're 3-1 down, and it's uphill after that.
But the challenge for that argument is that you're there in the bottom tier of the table because of 28, 27 other games.
Sure.
So you aren't just there because you've got your heads handed to you by Newcastle. That's the symptom. The disease is something else. The disease is under-coached, under-aroused, underperforming players and underperforming dugouts. And David has to take responsibility for that.
Leicester pulled the trigger on Brendan Rodgers.
I disagree with that. I think Brendan Rodgers pulled the trigger on himself, but that's just a view.
Can you understand why David Sullivan seemingly sticks with David Moyes at this particular time?
There is a tendency for David Sullivan, and once upon a time David Gold, God rest his soul, to have stayed with managers for a period of time through rough and through ups and downs. So it's not a trait that Sullivan has exhibited in previous incarnations, whether it was at Birmingham or where it's necessarily at West Ham. He doesn't just pull the trigger. There's also a scenario where, what do you replace him with? Because if you believe, as unsatisfactory as it may be, that you're going to get away with not getting relegated this season by being 4 or 5 places up the league than you are currently, and that will be unsatisfactory, then you're going to take that choice and review it in the summer. They clearly believe there's enough in that dressing room, enough in that management model to allow David to hang on to the situation and to get them out of jeopardy. Now, whether that conversation changes texture and tone and direction in the summer, I think possibly likely, because I think it's going to be a difficult situation for people. David might get a pass. They might win 4 or 5 games out of the ensuing games they've got, and they've got some difficult ones in there. Find themselves with 40 points, finish 13th, 12th, 14th in the league, right, and win a European competition. Everyone will go, what was so bad about that?
Yeah.
What was so bad about that is that's a false dawn. That is, you've papered over the cracks. You've been pretty poor all season.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, David Sullivan's caught between a rock and a hard place at the moment, isn't he? Because on the one hand, do you engage in a bit of fan outcry in some sections of the support by keeping David Moyes in position until the end of the season? Or do you go into the market where there would appear to be no obvious candidate, and that's why he's not doing it?
Well, there is that. I mean, I suspect David Sullivan's quite relieved someone's shouting at someone else besides him. So with that in mind, maybe he puts him up as a blame hound. Yeah. You know, quite happy for him. It's like someone, a dog that passes wind under the table, you blame the dog. It wasn't me, it was a dog.
Yeah.
So David Sullivan is quite happy for David Moyes to be in that current role. But the bottom line is that if they genuinely believed there was a real jeopardy,
yeah,
and on the balance of probability they're going to get relegated, they'll keep David Moyes in place, they would act. Or maybe they can follow the Chelsea model, put Mark Noble in charge, and go back to a legend, as that's the blueprint. But the bottom line is that they clearly think, and the win against Southampton would have perhaps cemented some of that thinking. They've got enough juice in that particular orange to squeeze out the pips and get to the point where they're in the Premier League next year. And then the consideration has to be, where are we going?
Well, that's right.
Has he lost the room?
Yeah.
Has David Moyes lost the room? Because if he's lost the room, what's the benefit? But I'll tell you something about Sullivan. He don't care about other people's opinions. He'll make his own opinion, and he'll form his own view, and he'll make his own decisions based upon what he thinks he knows.
For sure.
And he won't be swayed by background noise.
Yeah, understood. I accept that completely. At the moment, no noise at all from David Sullivan. Nothing coming out to suggest that his opinion on David Moyes has changed whatsoever.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.